Hello everybody, this is your Right Geek and Honorary Man King, here with another video. In this video, I'm going to be reading some portions of an article that I found very, very excellent on the subject of role models in fiction and in real life. And then I'm going to add my comments to it, my expansions and commentary upon it. So this article appeared in Quillette, which is a great website, by the way. I love it a lot. It features thoughtful people on both the left and right who are writing from more of a centrist perspective, and that I really appreciate. It gives me an opportunity to see lots of different perspectives. So this article in particular is entitled Girls Need Female Role Models and Other Bromides by, and I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name, Elena Shelneva. But I found your article a perfect description of my thoughts on the subject of female role models. So I'm just going to share some relevant portions with my audience and then discuss sort of my own responses and my own commentary on the subject. So, after she talks about some other bromides vis-a-vis how we interact with girls, she talks about, first of all, another apparently undeniable tenet is, we need a female perspective. Editors use this to justify the publication of dull women writers, but there is no such thing as a female perspective, or a male perspective for that matter, or a black perspective, or a Hispanic perspective, or an Asian perspective. Basically any perspective you can think of doesn't exist. One, our perspective is based on our individual experience and is therefore fundamentally subjective. Thank you, God, this is correct. Let me speak as someone who happens to be disabled. I can write articles or stories about what it's like to be disabled, but I will be writing from the perspective of someone who has severe rheumatoid arthritis, which is a very particular disability. And even within the category of people who suffer from rheumatoid arthritis, there's a lot of variability. Some people who develop symptoms of the condition much earlier are far more disabled than me. And there are some who have rheumatoid arthritis who are somewhat less disabled than I am. There's a lot of variety in that. So I can speak as someone who has rheumatoid arthritis, but all I can speak to is my individual perspective as someone who has my particular severity of the condition. If I were to presume to speak for everyone who has rheumatoid arthritis, that would be quite arrogant on my part, because each individual's experience of the disorder is different. Not only does it depend on the severity of the disease, but it also depends on the environment in which they're in. I happen to be in a relatively supportive environment. I happen to have a job that is sedentary. I'm a teacher. There's not a whole lot of activity involved in that. So at the very least, my job doesn't put a strain on me in terms of my medical conditions. But there may be other people out there who have a much more difficult experience related to their employment. So once again, I can't speak for everyone who has this condition. I also can't speak for everyone who is a woman, because once again, my experience of being a woman is probably very different from the experiences that other women have. So again, to presume that my female perspective is the female perspective is an incredibly arrogant presumption to make. So excellent. Our perspective is based on our individual experience and is therefore fundamentally subjective. Absolutely correct. She goes on a little bit later to say, but perhaps most aggravating of all is the idea that young girls need female role models. As its proponents are especially militant, I shall elaborate on this particular bromide in more detail. Yes, young girls need role models, but whether these role models are male or female is irrelevant. We admire other people for certain qualities. For me, these are honor, courage, talent, kindness, intellect, decency, perhaps skill, if it's on the level of mastery. At a stretch, I would add commercial savvy, but not gender. Gender does not belong on this list. So again, this particular author really, really gets it, I think. It is not enough just to have 50% women in everything. That is not actually going to give girls proper role models. What we need to be focusing on is not on the exterior characteristics of a person, whether that be in real life or in fiction, but we should focus on their internal character. So one of the problems that we're having nowadays, say in the comics industry, is that a lot of people seem to be under the impression that as long as the character is a female, it will be a good role model for girls. And what they are forgetting to do is they are forgetting to write characters that actually have moral character. So you get the phenomenon of female characters who are basically bitches, and they get sold as, yes, queen, slay, these women are so awesome, they're great role models for girls. But no, they're not. Girls need to be taught, just as boys need to be taught, how to be kind and decent and courageous and all of these positive moral qualities that a lot of today's female heroes lack, but a lot of female heroes in the past had in spades. So it's really, really important not to focus on the exterior qualities of a person, whether that be a real person or a fictional character. We need to focus more on the internal character. We need to, if we're going to write female characters, we need to write female characters who are actually admirable and heroic, and not focus so much on the fact that they have lady parts. So this author continues, when I was 6 years old, I saw a picture of my great countryman, Yuri Gagarin, the first man in space, and I resolved to become a cosmonaut. Gagarin's open, luminous smile, his astonishing courage, made me want to pull on the spacesuit, buckle up the scaphandre, strap myself to the pilot seat of Vostok 1, and shoot up to the open skies, to the far and the unknown, shoulder to shoulder with Colonel Gagarin, my co-pilot and second in command. Together we would discover Mars and Venus and Jupiter, and asteroid B612, the home of the Little Prince. Every evening we would sit on the edge of the Little Prince's tiny planet, feet dangling in the open space, and we watched the sunset and the planet Earth gleam blue from very far away. Gagarin was my first role model. I will always be in awe of his heroism. But why wasn't your role model Valentina Tereshkova, the first woman in space, some people ask. Tereshkova would have been a more appropriate example for a young girl. Sorry, more appropriate in what way? Well, she was more like you. As a woman, she faced similar challenges. But why should I be inspired by people like me? Out of a sense of duty or loyalty rather than sincere admiration? Isn't this a definition of thinking small and narrow? Yes, very, very good. Once again, in a previous video, when I was talking about, I believe it was my comic titties video, I mentioned that that I didn't need to have comic characters that looked like me, and that the comic character that I am currently most into is Iron Man, who is the exact opposite gender, a completely different social class and even has a rather different fundamental worldview, and yet there are experiential similarities and similarities in values and character that I latched onto. So once again, you don't need to have a female character to latch onto if you happen to be a female reader. You can latch onto a male character. You can latch onto a character who's a completely different race. You can latch onto a character that lives in a completely different country from you. We really need to get away from this idea that the only way we can relate to a character is if that character is like us in every respect. What that does fundamentally is that makes us very tribal. It causes us to not recognize the common humanity across cultures and across experiences. So, yes, this author has it exactly right. Do not focus on the external characteristics of a character or a person. Focus instead on their internal character and their internal skills. Please, all comic artists and writers, take note of this and do with it what you will. But if you're going to write female characters as a woman, I'm not just going to latch onto a female character just because she is female. I'm going to latch onto a character because she has character traits that I admire. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll talk to you again Monday night.